Hey there guys, so short video on how to get bigger shoulders and just keeping it really simple. A lot of people overcomplicate training shoulders and they just make it incredibly, difficult in terms of structure. So I'm just going to keep it really simple. Ideally, you just want to pick one variation of an overhead press that you enjoy and you want to get good at it. So for me, I chose the one arm overhead press, the dumbbell version, simply because when I can press a weight freely overhead, shoulder and elbow can move how it needs to. I'm not fixed into a heavily set range of motion, and that just means any chances of impinging the shoulder are a lot less. So from a longevity perspective and injury management point of view, you want to find an exercise that works, well in terms of achieving your goals. Another big advantage, with the one arm overhead press is I can pretty much work all three heads of the delt pretty effectively. There's going to be a lot of anterior delt used, but for the simple fact that I'm able to keep the dumbbell more in the midline of my body means that I can use a lot more of the medial and rear delts, and that's just a win. If you want to have big shoulders overall, you're going to have to work all three heads of the delt. But picking a movement that allows you to pretty much do it in one hit is going to be highly beneficial. So look, this time I've taken the weight up significantly. It's a lot heavier. Previous video, that was 56 kilos, 123 pounds for 20 reps. Now, when it comes to training shoulders, you also got to look at the anatomy of the shoulder joint. For a lot of people, it's a joint that can easily get aggravated, and unlike a hip joint, it's nowhere near as solid. You don't have that deep ball and socket that you do in the hip. The shoulder, it's it's a much shallower joint and a lot more prone to injury. So by going higher rep in general and reducing the load that you're going to use, your chances of injury are going to become far less. But also, when you can move the weight well and you can control it, you're going to get better results because you can actually feel what you're trying to work, as opposed to just solely, concentrating on getting the reps. So, you just want to pick an overhead variation where you can also really think about how is the actual weight moving and where do I feel it. That's going to make a massive difference. In terms of sets and reps, so I'm a little bit different. I prefer just working up to one or two all-out top sets. But prior to that, anywhere of, 4 sets of, 12 to 15 reps worked really well. And that becomes my primary, overhead press movement. And I treat it with the same regard as, say, a squat, a bench, or a deadlift. You're trying to track the weight, you're paying attention to your break times, push the break times out to 4 or 5 minutes between sets. You're trying to grow big shoulders, you want to put quality work in, and if you can chase strength in that movement in the higher rep range, hypertrophy is going to happen, especially when you're going into 12 reps and above. You're in the hypertrophy zone. There's no way around it. So if you can treat it with respect and really look to increase the reps that you're hitting, as well as the weight that you're using, and giving it that structure, you're going to find that your shoulders are going to be a lot healthier. They're going to get a lot bigger and a lot stronger, much quicker. After heavy overhead pressing, you might pick one or two assistant exercises for the shoulders. Personally, I prefer rear delt flies. I do them with dumbbell. I'm just trying to get the total volume in. Again, I'm keeping the reps, 12 plus, 3 to 4 sets, and then because it's an assistant exercise in that regard, I've dropped the break times down to 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, and I'm just trying to pump a whole lot of blood into the area. If you want, you could do 1 or 2 sets of your lateral raises. Some people like to really hit the front delts quite hard. Personally, when it comes to the overhead press and pressing on that day, I just want to hit my overheads well, and then just go more into the rear delt flies, and then a little bit of the medial head. So that's more the lateral flies, if you wanted, or lateral raises, whatever you want to call them. Anterior delt, I save more for bench press. A a lot of people, forget that, bench press at the end of the day, it's going to be one of the heaviest upper body movements you do. Therefore, you're going to be loading up the shoulders either directly or indirectly, depending on your group. So shoulders are going to get thoroughly worked. And, by keeping the reps, say on the one arm press and your other assistant exercises on the higher end, when you go to do a heavy bench, you're only hitting the shoulders with a low rep range once a week, and then the overhead press day is a higher rep range. So again, everything comes back to, looking after the body, trying to not get injured. But if you can put together one quality overhead pressing session a week, that's what I do, you will find that's all you need as long as you're training your other lifts. So with bench press, you might be doing 4 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 8. Delts are going to get worked thoroughly. So, I just, in the back of your mind, view that as another shoulder day. Keep it as a light shoulder day if you want, but the reality is that shoulders have been hit quite thoroughly when you bench press. So give yourself 2-3 days break and then do your quality overhead work, and that way you can really structure your shoulders and shoulder pressing day in a way that's going to be beneficial to just growing bigger shoulders. And you don't have to go crazy, as I said, with the volume. 4 sets for a primary overhead press movement is all you need, and then pick 1 or 2 assistant exercises of 3 to 4 sets if you want. If you want to cut it down to 2, you can. It's completely up to the individual, but 1 or 2 assistant exercises, and that is pretty much a shoulder session. And that keeping that simple approach is going to help beat you compared to a lot of other people where they just try and pick so many different exercises to try and get a job done. If you can just pick that quality movement, and then if you want your assistant exercises, you can swap and change every 2nd to 3rd week if you want to work the other angles, if you feel like you're missing out in that regard. Personally, for me, my delts were just grown with overhead press, bench press, and quite a lot of sets of just rear delt flies. Occasionally, I'll do some of the medial flies, lateral raises, but again, it's really not common. It just comes down to, overhead press, bench press, and rear delt flies. Again, 4 sets works really well. You only have to hit it once a week hard in terms of a quality session. And keep the break times on your overheads around 4 to 5 minutes, because you're trying to grow and trying to improve the lift itself as well. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below. Hit like and subscribe, and have a great day wherever you are.